Welcome to Pressure Point. I'm Marilou Carrillo. We can't deny the cultural and racial diversity in our towns, our cities, and even in our families. But what's really going on behind these varied restaurants and faces on the buses and the different cultures in our schools? Is this just cultural and racial strife, cultural tensions, or how is racism being experienced and felt behind this diversity? With us to explore these questions and perhaps ask more questions about racism is Arsinoee Quammie, who's an educator in human rights and racism and race education. Welcome, Arsinoee.
Thank you, Marilou, and I'm very pleased to be here with you.
So, what is racism from your point of view as a black woman?
Okay, as a black woman, racism, well, as a human being, racism is any action directed against minorities because of racial factors, because of racial differences or different racial features. And it could be denying them access to housing. It could be them being penalizing at schools. There are problems, as you know, racism is systemic and endemic. It could happen in schools. Sometimes it's very difficult for racial ethnic minorities to survive in universities. And of course in the job market. So it could be a number of ways, denying access to minorities, to any human being because of their race and color.
Yeah. You know, I mean, let's just face the fact here about racism is that people from white communities have a different perspective on racism as people of color. So one of the questions is racism fact or fiction? Some people will say, there's no such thing. What are you talking about? And some people are saying, of course there's racism. Fact or fiction?
Oh, that couldn't be any fiction, Marilou. Racism have done a lot of damage to people. To put it mildly, racism can destroy young people. Some young people sit in the classrooms, depending on the way they are treated because of their race, they stop being productive. Their self-esteem get lower and lower. And of course, as you probably know, racism can kill people. For example, depending on who you are dealing with, when an arrest is being made by the police, sometimes the wrong person is arrested, and depending on who the officers are, there are remarks that are made, and the officers are sometimes quicker to react with their guns than they would have been under normal circumstances if they are arresting a white person.
But you know, people will say, well, that was just that situation, or it was just that particular officer. You know, why are you so quick to jump and say it's racism?
It's racism. Well, we have to say that because it has happened. When something has happened more than one occasions, you have to begin to think and analyze what has taken place. And they themselves recognize that there are problems. For example, a man stole a loaf of bread, and the man ended up dying. And that was, you know, somebody of Latin American background. And I don't see too many young white kids dying when they steal a loaf of bread. Another young, again, Latin American young man got killed not too long ago because he stole a pair of pants. And these are situations, you know, they always invoke it's a mistakes, but we do not see other race, other white youngsters being killed for stealing a loaf of bread and a pair of pants. Or in one case, one young man did not have the money to pay a taxi for $9, and he died, and the explanation was the gun conked out. But these raise questions, and they are valid questions. I've seen the police once cornered a man who had threatened to kill his spouse, and he was being held in the house for more than a day, for quite a few hours. When he came out, the police embraced him. Whereas
This is a white man?
This was a white man. But when the police is involved with other minorities, be it black, Latin American, or others, you do not see those gestures. The guns go out first.
You know, again, people are questioning and saying, well, why would that be called racism versus prejudice? So you ran into a bunch of people who are prejudiced. Mm-hmm. It's a personal problem that these people have. Mm-hmm. This is not racism. Mm-hmm. So how do we differentiate
prejudice,
those concepts or those words of what's prejudice, what's personal, and what's racism?
Okay. Prejudice is on a much more milder form than racism. For example, prejudice, let's say if you say that there might be black people or Asian people or any other minorities that are prejudiced against the white population. I would say, first of all, sometimes it's a reaction against the injustices that they have suffered. And again, they do not have any power to inflict abuses on the white population. Absolutely not. So you couldn't say that they are abusing the. Yes, there may be some form of misunderstanding, some form of discomfort, but nothing as compared to racism. Racism is total discriminations against a person, and of course with the intent to hurt and to deny. For example, if when you call, as it has happened to my daughter, when you call for a job, and there is a job, and on the phone there is a job, and by the time you reach, there is no job. Now, you wouldn't find in minorities, you know, in power to deny, you know, a white person a job on that basis, because by and large, they do not control the economy. When you reach, there is no job when they look at you and they look at your color, and you are the wrong color. And another thing that has happened to me is that there was a time that I thought I wanted to rent an apartment, and that happens almost every day. You know, it's a daily incidents either in Montreal, Toronto. I don't know to what extent this is prevalent here in BC, but I know it happens regularly in Montreal, regularly in Quebec, and in Ontario and in Nova Scotia. You call to have to inspect an apartment and ask there is an apartment, and they say yes, come. By the time you reach, there is no more apartment. We've had students at McGill and other universities who've had somebody go back and double check, only to find out, you know, if another white young man or woman present himself or herself, the apartment is there. So there is clear distinction between prejudice. Prejudice is a much, you know, milder forms of, let's say, it's first of all, it's reactions of minorities against the sufferings. And for example, if you, you know, if you were talking about something, I didn't like it, and I would say, well, maybe Marilou, I have some kind of prejudice against such and such subjects. But you could not definitely compare prejudice and racism.
Yeah, some people talk about the difference as if there's prejudice and power, you have racism.
Yes, yes, definitely we could say that.
Yeah.
We can say that.
Right.
But still, it's a much more severe case with much more devastating consequences on a person that is being discriminated against.
How else do you see systemic racism?
Well,
by that we mean, again, prejudice applied by groups or groups of persons with, or institutions with power.
Well, when systemic racism, it means then it affects all the establishments, you know, that is the structures of the country in terms of banking, in terms of denying right to enter universities, or denying, or you know, if a person can't get to practice nursing, as has happened sometimes, and they have to write letters and push for them to get their permit, or do the same for them to get their permit from the government. So in that case, we are talking about the system, whether it be the church, whether it be the financial institutions or the educational institutions.
So how would our churches or our religious institutions be racist?
Well, there are a number of situations. For example, I know that minorities have had a hard time getting in the ministry at times. It's very difficult for them, if they do get accepted, for them to get a charge after. And at the same time, the structure is such in the church that the predominant group is the one really with the power to run the institutions, and therefore denying access to minorities to voice their opinion or even to contribute legitimately, or you know, to put valid propositions forward. For example, let's call a church B, and then you have all the major divisions where all the major divisions, the people that are running those divisions are predominantly white.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just trying to clarify that term. A dominant, or,
yes, okay.
You know, the dominant, you mean white,
mm-hmm. Yes.
European.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if you have the church being run by those people, and there is nothing wrong with it, but at the same time, the minorities, there are quite a number of minorities at the moment in churches. I believe that it is very important that they are listened to, not only listened to, they partake in the structuring of what is happening, because they not only they have legitimate concerns, and their theology is somewhat different because of where they grow up. Their theology and their Christianity is very close to what I believe that Christ came to to share with us in terms of our responsibilities and towards one another, and in terms of our own Christian belief and self-development. Mm-hmm. So there is all that.
But what about people in institutions, not necessarily religious institutions, but as you and mm-hmm. I both know, in educational institutions? Mm-hmm. What about people who say, well, you know, we've got race relations committees, mm-hmm. we've got, you know, X-colored person in such a committee, and mm-hmm. you know, what more do you want is the question.
What more do I want? The race relations committees, Marilou, could be meaningless if they are not addressing issues of human rights and human rights violations, if they are not standing in solidarity and advocating with the people that are being hurt, if they are a nice bunch of people, you know, no matter what color they are, and they are not paying attention to the needs and the miseries of the people, say whether it's First Nation people, whether it's Asian Indian or African Canadians or any minorities that are being affected. I believe the duty of any race relations, when there is a problem in the community, they are to be there to accompany those people to make sure that they get a fair hearing mm-hmm. and the appropriate decisions taken to counteract, not only counteract the damages, but also to do prevention mm-hmm. and restitution.
Now, another question people say, you know, in BC, we mm-hmm. just had this, I think, a very important a signing of a treaty with the Nisga'a Nation mm-hmm. in principle. Mm-hmm. And of course, the comment by prominent people is one law for everyone. You know, I've heard people say, well, that was the past, and we're now in the present. Mm-hmm. We're not oppressing the First Nations people anymore, so mm-hmm. why don't we just forget the past and let's carry on? Well, so isn't it one law for everyone, and let's just forget the past?
Well,
what's that about?
Well, you know, Marilou, the First Nation people have suffered a lot. They have been dispossessed, and they continue to suffer a great deal. And any little thing that is being done, we can't say it's too late, because it must take place in order for the transformation and the change to take place. So it's due, it's just due that is due to them. And in fact, when I look at what's happening, you know, in the quote-unquote third world, sometimes the disasters that has happened in Rwanda, in the different places in Ethiopia, and I am deeply grateful and appreciative of all the effort that the, you know, the Western community have poured in order to save those people. But at the same time, when I look at what is happening right here in Canada, I look at young children, you know, sniffing glues, you know, in some of the reserve in First Nations, and I look at that some of them don't even have running water or proper care or proper habitation. I can tell you that I feel deeply concerned, hurt, embarrassed, and ashamed. So if something is being done to recognize the injustices that are being done, and I think we all should applaud it and stand by it, and encourage for more and more of this to happen, and of course to eradicate the poverty that exists among the First Nation
You've mentioned addressing injustice a couple of times, as we've talked about a Korean-American theologian, Jung Young Lee, in his book Multiculturalism, or Marginality rather, the key to multicultural theology. Says that there is no reconciliation unless the injustice has been addressed.
Yes, you have to. There must be. I know today people don't talk much about repentance and sin. However, we have to think about repentance. People need to be sorry, not just sorry for what they have done, but make amend in order for forgiveness to take place. You need to show that the people that you've hurt, you have understood what you have done, and you are willing not only to stop but to make amends and not to begin again. So that's what he's talking about.
And hence the importance of history.
Definitely.
That's why we can't just forget about that.
No.
Now, what are white people's blind spots on this?
Well, unfortunately, you know, before I came here, I would never have thought there exists so much racism in Canada. It's kind of...
Sorry, came from where?
Before I lived in Haiti, you know, in my early 20s. Then I lived in Jamaica for a number of years. And then when I came here in the 70s, I lived in southwestern Ontario, then in eastern Ontario, and now I'm in Montreal.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So
okay. So before I arrived here, I went to school, and all my teachers were French-Canadian nuns, very, very nice people, and French-Canadian priests, very, very nice people. And most of us had this sort of ideal situations, you know, about Canada. And I did say that I did not want my children to grow up in this state with, you know, a white church, a black church, and I prefer my children to be in Canada. I do still prefer my children to be in Canada, but I was not prepared at all for the sufferings and that was forced upon these children on their arrival here. Especially, I shouldn't say, my son was born here, but my daughter came here when she was young. And up to today, I wonder whether I have made the right decision bringing her here.
What is the core of that suffering?
There was a lot of racism in the classroom, and which the teachers were not prepared to deal with. She was a very bright, outgoing young woman, and she became very shy, very withdrawn. Children did not play with her. She you know, took the bus to come to school. Children would not let her sit on the bus, and I had to go to tell the principal, you know, this could not continue, because I explained to him that I pay taxes like the rest, and I wanted my child to be seated on the bus, and the bus driver should see that happen. And she not too long ago told me in a conversation, and I was deeply touched. Although, you know, we supposedly were quote unquote from middle class, and a father, United Church minister, I am a teacher, we had no idea the child had suffered so much in the school. And because we surrounded her with love, and we had good parents, we were having a conversation just like that. And she says, Mom, you do not know what went on, how much I suffered in the school. I said, do you know how it feels never having anyone to play with you throughout your school years, in elementary school and in high school? And I said, Andrea, I put my arm around her, why? You never told me those things. She said, Mom, I didn't want you to be sad. I didn't want you to be unhappy. And she said, all the dances you encouraged me to go, no one would ever dance with me or sat with me throughout all those years. And that hurt. She's beautiful and talented, intelligent. Throughout high school, she didn't have to write her English exams because she was exempted. Her marks were 80. When at 18, she was working at the banks and she had a good salary. She finishes journalism at Concordia. She started working for the CPC, a lovely young woman. Not because she's my daughter, but a lovely person. But she suffered a lot.
You're also noting the difference between knowing someone versus the image of someone, because knowing a black woman whose name is Andrell is a different experience from knowing a black person that we know from the media, you know, the stereotype. This is a different kind of knowing.
Yes, that is very true. I must hasten to add also, Marilou, that all my life I have advocated for justice for all, and I live very close to the hurts and misery of children of other minorities. And at one point in time, I was constantly on the defensive, either with teachers, either with administrations, or either with my superiors in terms of what has happened and what's happening to some of these young people in terms of racism, flagrant racism. So I bear the pain of the parents and I bear the pains of those kids, not just mine.
Now, these are some of the effects of racism on the people that we call who have been dominated, the non-dominant group. Now, this concept of internalized oppression is an important one, where people say that, oh, you know, the nastiest comment about blacks come from blacks themselves, or the nastiest comments about Filipinos or Chinese or Latin Americans come from those people themselves. So what kind of effect?
Why do they do that, Marilou? It's a way of protecting themselves, because when you have suffered and suffered and suffered and there is no end in sight, you don't know what to do or what to turn to. If you begin to call yourself those names, you accept in principle that when you hear it, it doesn't hurt you anymore.
And last night, well, we heard Dr. Sally McFaig talk about the privileged perspective of the arrogant I, who looks at someone and creates an image of that someone, to the point that that group or that person begins to believe what the other person is seeing. So for people who've come from countries that have been colonized for centuries, Haiti, the Philippines in our cases, and we can name numerous others. The image of ourselves have been drawn so much by the colonizers, the European colonizers, that it comes to a point where we begin to believe
that we are incapable.
How we have been seen. And that's how I relate internalized oppression as well.
Yes, that is definitely a facet of it. For example, a quick example I can give you, you know, when I was in Africa, I was talking to a very learned man I enjoyed seeing, and I can't remember his name at the moment. He said that when the white man came to meet the African in Africa, they went to meet him with their hope. But by the time that they have been colonized, they have lost every self-respect. They have become so dehumanized, and that they completely forgot how to look after themselves. Eventually, they forgot how to make the hoe. And it's the white man that came back again and teach them how to make a hoe and how to do it. So that's one implication.
It's a loss of identity. What effect does racism have on the dominant group? Our title is Racism Hurts Us All.
Well, yes.
What effect does racism have
Yes.
on the dominant group. That's hurtful.
Well, racism cannot benefit anyone, Marilou, because racism, bring out fear, hatred, mistrust, misunderstanding, and no one wants to live in a society where there is all kind of antagonism, because you are almost at war, if not within yourself, but of course in the society among you, and you are always on the defensive. And a society cannot prosper with this antagonism. And of course, from a selfish point of view, business will suffer if there isn't a better understanding between the different
the ideology will suffer.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if this is positive, but you know, 10, 15 years ago, there would not be a woman of color like myself as a host on a show like this.
That's
much else
true.
have a guest, a woman of a woman of color like yourself. So what has changed?
What has changed? What has changed, and I'd like the positive things, I must say, now thank you very much to all the people that have that stood in solidarity with us, that allowed us to make this progress. Because in all situations, for example, during the slavery delays here in America, there were people against that type of, dehumanization. Some of the loyalists were against the colonizations of blacks here, and they were white men. So I must say, it's not all the, they are good people that are from the dominant group, good white people that will not stand for these injustices to take place. And so far, they have been assisting us and helping us to move forward in the direction that we have.
Are you also saying that there are some things that are best said by white persons to the white groups? Definitely.
I believe if for all the injustices that are taking place, we need our white brothers and sisters, and especially people with ethics, with values, humanitarian, to speak against those oppressions, to tell their other white brothers and sisters that this kind of dehumanization is not acceptable, and they are liable to listen to them as opposed to listening to the minorities they claim is crying all the time, and it's the same story.
Thank you very much.
You are most welcome.
For exploring this difficult but important topic of racism today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Arsinoee.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Pressure Point. If you'd like information about this program or a videotape, please contact the Audiovisual Education Library.
The preceding program was produced through the facilities of Rogers Community 4, Vancouver. We want to hear from you and invite you to leave your comments and suggestions on our 24-hour response line message machine. Please call 731-5812.